Time is what we want most, but what we use worst. William Penn. Time, funny enough, is a polarizing subject in communication and public speaking. And the reason is because we all have different feelings towards it. Some are afraid to be overtime, others are afraid to be undertime. Some people don't really look at their clock at all and say, oh, is the presentation over? And then there's others who practice so meticulously until the length of their presentation is exactly 17 minutes and 52 seconds. So what's my opinion on time? That's exactly what we'll be figuring out on this week's episode of the MasterTalk. Hi everyone, Brendan here for MasterTalk on your go-to channel to mastering your talk. And today we're talking about time on how to manage it properly for your success. So let the clock start ticking. Number one, only keep what's golden. When you prepare for your presentations at the end of the day, everyone, you want to start getting a version that makes sense for you. So don't be shy to create movement. Get a presentation together. But then once it's done, the real work begins, which is you look at it and you say, how do I synthesize my information? How do I make this sound more impactful? And there's a great question by the founder of Instagram, Kevin Systrom, that he shared on an episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast. And I love it so much that I use it with all of my clients and I teach it as many times as I can, which is simply this. If you had to remove one part of my speech, what would you remove and why? The reason I love this question is because it forces the person that's listening to you to take something out. And this is what I mean by only keep what's golden. The only way that you figure out what's gold is by going through the rubble. You need to dig until you find the gold. And you could only do that with time and with feedback from people around you. So I encourage you to take a piece of paper and write that question out so you're constantly asking people all the time. If you had to remove something, what would you remove and why? And keep the momentum going. And that will immediately bring the time of your presentation down or up. If you say, if you had to add something from my presentation or to my presentation, what would you add and why? Number two, have an undercover watch. The strategy is super simple, everyone. Create pauses intentionally in your presentation to look at your watch. I'll give you an example. A lot of the times when I give a workshop or a presentation, I always ask this question. How would your life change if you're an exceptional communicator? So I make my audience do two things. I either have them close their eyes to reflect on how their life would be different so they imagine it for themselves, or I tell them to spend 2 minutes and write it down on a piece of paper. So that way, when you have them do a little exercise, they're not focused on you anymore. They're focused on the homework that they're doing. So when that's actually happening, it gives you a great opportunity to just look at your watch. And that's really the strategy, is create intentional pauses in your presentation so that you can look at your watch and not have to worry about it. And finally, number three, have different versions of the same presentation. This is something I actually teach all of my clients when they give keynote presentations or something really important, is you'll find oftentimes that the time that they gave you isn't actually the time that you're allotted when you get to the event. I remember once I had to give a presentation for 25 minutes and I learned the day of that I had 20 and half of it had to be given in French. And I went, what? So when you're a professional speaker or really communicator in general, you'll always be faced with situations that you don't expect. That's why I call this strategy 3-5-10, which is simply this. Have a 3-minute, a 5-minute, and a 10-minute version of what you were going to say in your presentation, regardless of how long the presentation is. So obviously, if you're supposed to deliver a 45-minute keynote, have a 45-minute keynote ready. but also have different versions of time ready. It could be 3, it could be 5, it could be 10, it could be 25, so that if you get placed in those situations, you know immediately what to chop up and create a casserole out of, if you get my point. And that's really the key to time, is you need to be willing to adjust. Of course, in some situations, the timing is very strict and on agenda, like TED. TED is 18 minutes and you just can't go over 18 minutes. And other competitions, other formats had different ways of managing your time. And that's why you need to really make an effort to understand all of those pieces in advance and prepare accordingly. William Penn said it best: time is what we want most in our life, yet we allocate it so inefficiently, not just in our presentations, but really in our life. A professional speaker once told me something that's going to stay with me for the rest of my life. He said, "Remember, Brendan, is if your presentation is 30 minutes, you are not taking 30 minutes out of somebody's day. You are taking 30 minutes out of 500 people's days, out of 10,000 people's day, out of 100,000 people's day." And that's the mentality I want you to have when you present, Brendan. Think of time as such a precious resource that you're going to make every second count. And I hope in this video, hopefully, I made every second count. As always, if you enjoyed this week's episode of MasterTalk, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well to see more videos like this. And if you know one person who, let's face it, when you have dinner with them, they're always never on time, send them this video so that they'll be one step closer to at least managing their time more effectively in presentations. Take care.